was, and she'll be back. All right, so I will call the meeting to order at 5:30. Just before we get into the agenda, I will do the land acknowledgement. The City of Lacombe acknowledges that we live, work, and govern on the shared territory of Treaty 6. We honor the histories, languages, cultures, and continuing contributions of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dene, Nakota Sioux, and other First Nations, as well as the Métis people of the Métis Nation of Alberta District 4 and beyond. We affirm our ongoing relationship with this land and commit to respectful and meaningful engagement with Indigenous peoples as partners in our community. So the first item up then would be our consent agenda, and I see that Councillor Dyke-Slag is back online. Consent agenda. Are there any items that need to be consent agenda, or is somebody prepared to adopt the consent agenda as presented? Councillor Contenti.
Yes, I move that we.
Seeing no further lights, we can proceed to the vote. And that is all green, which is unanimous. That moves us then to the regular meeting agenda. Is there any changes to the meeting agenda as outlined? CAO Gowdy?
Oops. Just in terms of camera lens labeling does not actually have a specific date associated with it. Postponing information. So to be tabled December 15th. Full disclosure.
So that item is not urgent, so I would be in agreement with that. Is anybody speaking against doing that? Does not appear to be so. Is there any further changes to the agenda? Okay, with that amendment, would somebody be willing to make the motion to adopt the agenda as amended? Councillor DeBresser.
I move to adopt the agenda as amended.
Thank you. And I'll call the question. You can go ahead and vote. And that too is green. Thank you. So then that allows us to then move into our request for decision. Yep. So 6.1, Q3 2025 operating variance report. And if you don't mind just turning your microphone on and just introducing yourself, because those that are watching online will not be able to see you.
All right. Good evening, Mayor Hibbs and Council. My name is Michael Levier. I am the Acting Manager of Financial Services for the city. Tonight, I'm here to present the Q3 variance report for 2025, which covers January through September. As at the end of the third quarter, the city's in a positive financial position, sitting at a surplus of around 2 million, which is up from 1.7 million in Q2. This increased surplus is due to user fee revenue from the summer months and property tax penalties now being reported this time, as well as the impact from personnel vacancies and leaves for the first 3 quarters, being the largest single contributor to the surplus. The rest of the surplus is attributable mainly to timing differences in user fees, goods and services expenses, interest and penalties, sales of land and equipment, and offsite levies. The surplus is expected to decrease for the remainder of the year as planned expenditures are incurred, reallocated for accounting purposes. Going to the next section, just breaking down revenue, the overall revenue surplus of 1.6 million. There's a few categories there that'll go over, just being goods and services revenue. This one is up over budget by 683,000. 431,000 makes up, or 431,000 of that is made up of Parallax water agreement revenue. Security clearances are 217,000 under budget, which decreases that surplus. Then user fees for the cemetery, utilities, and recreation facilities are currently over budget by 272,000, which you'll see later on in the report. There's an expense overage that offsets that partially. Then finally, there's 200,000 in land sales and insurance proceeds that are unbudgeted. Interest and penalties are 232,000 higher than the budget. 90,000 of that are penalties on accounts, so property tax penalties and utility penalties. Interest revenue is 103,000 higher than budgeted. WCB rebate is 30,000 of budgeted amount. Other revenue sources shows a positive variance of 576,000. 22,000 of that is a construction advance refund for the Trinity Crossing Phase 2 project. 124,000 is a refundable or an affordable housing grant, which is to be offset in 2026 via a transfer to local organizations. 220,000 represents Red Deer District or Red Deer End District Community Foundation grant that was reissued to the Broom Tree Foundation, and you'll see an offsetting expense for that same amount below. And finally, 77,000 in offsite levies. Moving on to expenses, this makes up the other about 400,000 of the surplus. Funding to others is 281,000 over budget, and you'll see there that 221,000 coming back the offsetting expense side. And then 156,000 in over budgeted water purchases for resale, which offsets part of that user fee surplus in revenue section. Goods and services costs are 250,000 over budget. This includes things such as professional services, travel, training and supplies. And these budget lines are mostly allocated evenly across the year, but timing differences in actual expenditures across departments have contributed to that current variance. Personnel costs are under budget by 875,000 because of position vacancies, timing of seasonal employees, and short-term leaves. Requisitions are over budget by 120,000, which represents the amount for the separate school requisition. This variance is already reconciled in the proposed 2026 operating budget. Transfers to reserves are the last item here, which are over budget by 340,000. And again, mainly due to the surplus in the Parallax water agreement and also budgeted transfers in sale of fleet and equipment. Next section, or the last section of the report, shows the variance report schedule with Q4 details coming in April of 2026, along with the financial audit presentation. And finally, appendices A and B are attached for further on these variances. Thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to support any discussion.
Thank you. Do we have any questions on the report? Checking to make sure there isn't anything online. No, does not appear to be. All right, well, I guess you might be getting off a little bit early. Well-written memo, that's very detailed, so I do appreciate that. If somebody would like to make the recommended motion, then if there are no questions or concerns. Councillor Proud.
I move that council acknowledge receipt of the 2025 Quarter 3 financial report.
No further lights. I'll call the question. Please proceed to vote. And that is all green. That is unanimous. Thank you. All right, that brings us then to the next item on our request for decision. That'd be the 10-year capital plan, 2026 to 2036. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mayor Hibbs. So this time I'm here to present the second draft of the 2026 to 2035 10-year capital plan. Purpose of the capital plan is to outline the future capital requirements of the city based on council priorities and existing infrastructure maintenance requirements. First year of the plan is the 2026 capital budget, which will be approved to authorize capital expenditures for that year. And then the remaining 9 years are for planning only, not authorizations for expenditures. From November 5th to 7th, council and administration reviewed the 10-year capital plan during our budget workshop. The outcome of that workshop resulted in a number of changes that have been shown in Table 1. I'll go through those with you here. First one, demolition and remediation of the old public works shop has been updated now to remove $500,000 in estimated remediation costs from 26 to 27. Keeping $500,000 in 26 for the demolition and assessment work. Next item is $193,000 was allocated to 2026 from 27, work related to the development of pedestrian trail to Midway. Next item is $62,500 was moved from 28 to 2026 to add a second new brow to the Fairview Cemetery Columbarium. The original budget was to add one new brow. $193,000 for pickleball and badminton courts and a storage shed were removed. The capital plan. And then finally, the full cost of $1.3 million for the recreation master plan implementation was allocated evenly over 4 years from 2027 to 2030. The overall impact on these changes was a reduction of $193,000 to bring the total estimated capital expenditures to $119.2 million. Estimated funding sources for the 10-year plan are largely unchanged, with the exception now that $193,000 less is being funded from debentures with that change. So changes were brought forward to major capital projects in the 10-year plan and no changes in administration's assumptions from last presentation. There was an emerging item that came to our administration's attention. Councillor Span had come to administration with an additional scenario to explore, which was to delay the new City Hall project 1 or 2 years outside of the 10-year plan. Bit of background on the project is funded primarily by provincial grants and long-term debt, with $2.5 million out of the 12.5 coming from the general capital reserve. Pass it on now to CAO Gowdy, kind of explain a bit more on the scenario.
CAO Gowdy.
Thank you, Mayor Hibbs. So to summarize the question that we received from Councillor Span, it was along the lines of what would be the impact on the operating budget if the City Hall capital project were to be delayed one year was the question, but we looked at 1 and 2 years. And so as much as it seems like a straightforward question, it is actually kind of a complex answer. That I will draw your attention to Appendix 4 in this memo. So if you go back on the 10-year capital plan, you go to Appendix 4, that is the 10-year impact of new debt on the tax rate. This is where you really start to feel pressures of competing policy priorities. So to put it as simply as I can, right now, you're already not saving enough money to pay for a new city hall. Most of the things in your capital plan, a lot of them rely on taking on new debt. Impact of new debt is going to add directly to tax rate. And by capping yourself at a self-imposed tax rate increase of inflation, really does give you, on average, just enough room to pay the increased costs of pavement and gasoline and insurance and wages and all the inflation-based stuff. You already in your capital plan are relying on, you can see there maybe 1.3, 1.4% tax rate impact for new debt in a given year. So if you push the new city hall off, right off of the 10-year capital plan, although that removes 12.5 million of total spending, only 2.5 million of that spending was actually reserve funded. So 10 million of it was just new debt. So that 2.5 million that you would have saved up instead of applying it to the new city hall or other projects such as a regional recreation facility that are entirely debt funded. So you would end up reallocating those savings to a new project and buffering the debt rate increase. So from a financial standpoint, it is always good to push projects further off. It gives you more time to save for it, and therefore you need to save less in any given year to save the same amount at the end. But it does not drive any direct impact in terms of savings to your operating budget in 2026. It would do is moderate some of these where you're seeing 1.8 tail end of 10-year capital plan. Instead of 1.8, that might be 0.5. Don't quote me on those numbers exactly, but it would be a lower number that you would be dealing with in terms of new debt servicing. So that's the kind of gloomy position you find yourself in, is you have these competing priorities of inflation-based tax increases. In many years, the majority of that room is gone because of new debt projects. So if you push this project off of the 10-year capital plan, it doesn't directly drive significant savings services directly. At the 10-year mark or the 11-year mark, see some savings.
Councillor Span, did you have some questions?
Yeah, two comments on that. There was the I guess through Mayor Hibbs to CAO Gowdy. There was mention that the purchase for the city hall would be coming from provincial grants and new debt. In the package we received, it showed in years 9 and 10 when that project was going to be purchased, the 2.5 million in year 9 and then the 10 million in year 10. No new debt being taken on. Can you speak to that? And the other comment that I had was if that project were to get pushed off a year or two, but we assume that we took on the same amount of debt as what we're currently projected to do, how does that impact things? Rather than right now, we're assuming over the entire 10-year project of the 119 million, I believe it is, we're assuming that about 20 to 23 million would be new debt. If we assume we're still going to take on $22 million over that period of time, it should have a larger impact on our operating expenses or on our capital project budget.
Yes, so sorry, you kind of asked two questions. Can you just, the first part again? Can you remind me? Actually, I'll answer the second part and then let's come back. Okay, yes. Right now, sorry, there was the first part, there was a reference to provincial grant funding the city hall project. How much provincial grant funding is associated with the city hall project?
Mayor Hibbs through to CAO Gowdy, 5 million.
5 million. So if you're planning to have saved 2.5 million by year 10, but instead you need 2.5 million by 12, for example, then rather than saving tenth of 0.5 million or 250,000, you would need 1/12 of 2.5 million or 300, sorry, just over 200,000, 20 or something. So it does lower your overall, if it was a closed system that was fully funded, it would lower your overall contribution. Fortunately, right now, you're not on track to save that 2.5 million. When we take the entire reserve requirements over the 10-year capital plan and add them up and divide by 10, you're about $100,000 short already. So even if you spread out that savings of the 2.5 million for City Hall over 12 years or even 14 years, all it does is mean close that gap from like you should have been saving X 100,000, but you're 100,000 short of that today. If you can save 50,000 through this deferral program, that's good. It is good and it's worth considering and that, but you're only 50,000 short of your intended goal. It's not like now there's 50,000 left to moderate tax rate increases.
And I guess what I'm through Mayor Hibbs to CAO Gowdy, I guess what I'm trying to find out is if we kept on our current trajectory, but we just push things off. Yeah, there would be some shortfall that we need to make up in the future, but it wouldn't be a additional shortfall. It would be on our current trajectory now instead of, yeah, like you said, being 50,000 or $100,000 short. Now we're only 50,000.
Yeah.
So are you saying that it would, in essence, put us $50,000 more on track per month or per year?
Per year, and if that's 50,000 is a very round number that we're picking, but yes. So if you push the projects out, not only does it not create a larger gap, it actually gives you the opportunity to potentially close that gap or save the same amount over a longer period of time, which does have a lower operating impact, excuse me, over those 10 years. Where you're running into issues is there's just you're not funded right now because there's this existing shortfall. No matter what you save, there's sort of like insatiable amount of need to fund the projects you've identified in the 10 years that already relies on debt rates, debt servicing that's going to strain your ability to meet your policy target related to inflation.
So my understanding is generally you're saving in your reserves and then whatever you don't have saved in your reserves, you fund through debt.
Debt and or grants or outside country, but yes, that's a primary mechanism.
So currently with what we're saving, we're projecting to have a certain amount of loans taken out for this capital project. And what I'm hearing is that if we push it off a year, you're telling me, at least my understanding is, we'll have to take less debt on this project.
Not if you save the same amount.
That's what I'm trying to get at. If we save the same amount,
Then
or how much savings is there if we're taking on the same amount of debt? If we take on the same amount of debt, what does that change our savings number to?
So if the project is the same at the 12.5 million, whether you save that over 10 years or 12 years won't have any impact on how much you have to borrow. It would have.
Why not?
Well, it depends, I guess. If you're saving, so 2.5 million is the amount we're saving. So if you save it over 10 years or 12 years, you save it over 12 years, you won't have to save 250 a year. You'll have to save some lower number. But if you continue the saving 250 every year for 12 years, then you have 3 million at the end. That would likely result in some lower debt, with the caution of inflation eat 300,000 on a $12 million project pretty quickly. I don't years, but you would be facing that kind of like.
But you would be facing that regardless of whether it got pushed off a year or not,
But
for the most part.
the majority of it, but every year that you
Yep.
push off, of course, is another year. So it depends on your strategy of, do you save the same amount every year for additional years? Yes, that's probably lower debt. If you save the same amount just over more years, then you get that operational budget savings ahead of
Mhm.
time.
Mhm.
Anything further, Councillor Span?
Not on this item, no.
Just have a question on just the timing. So this is year 10 of a 10-year budget, this specific item. Of course, this is a plan that's not set in stone. We're not like adopting it today and that can't change. What is the impact if you just simply year to year until you decide otherwise, keep pushing that back so that it's still on the 10-year capital plan, not actually pushed off? But it just, next year just gets decided, you know what, we're not ready to do this in 9 years. We're going to keep it at 10. Can you just say if there's an impact that's associated with that?
Thank you, Mayor Hibbs. It would be very similar to Councillor Span's approach. A similar way of getting at the same thing, rather than upfront saying, let's save 250 every year for 12 years. You're saying, let's save 250 this year, we say for 10 years. Next year we say, oh, again for 10 years. And then 10 years. And so it accomplishes the same thing. But I do just want to clarify, I don't think it's year 10. I think there's 2.5 in year 9 and 10 in year 10. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Sorry, you are right. I just assumed that the actual build would happen in year 10, but yes.
And thank you, if I can. The other part of your question was, why isn't there debt servicing that shows up in year 10 when we're projecting $10 million of borrowing between year 9 and 10? And that's just a function of timing. The way we approach these projects is we'll just go out of the cash flow to pay the bills as the construction's happening. Then you take the debt out the following year, the first payment coming out. So it just doesn't show it, but there is planned debt associated. 7.5 million of debt for this particular project. Sorry, 5 million debt. Is that correct? 5 million of provincial funding, 2.5 of reserves, and 5 million of debt.
5 million of debt, 5 million of provincial grants, and 2.5 million from reserve transfers.
Councillor Span, did you have anything additional?
What is the amount that we're currently saving into reserves for this project right now?
tough to say exactly what's to this project because of the overall. There's a total reserve funded component that's going to pay for this 10-year capital plan. If it were a perfectly funded plan, 250,000 every year would be going towards this. But because you're not meeting that full optimum reserve contribution, you're about $100,000 shy, and where that 100,000 comes from, something less than 200. Do you have an idea? Sorry to put you on the spot, but what is that number of the total reserve funded contributions to the 10-year capital plan? Totaled up divided by 10.
It's roughly 1.1213 million.
So you could say that you're about, roughly speaking, 10% shy. That $100,000 that you're short is about 10% shy of your ideal number. So the 250,000 ought to be putting away for this. You're putting about 225,000.
So if I'm through Mayor Hibbs to CAO Gowdy, if I'm understanding that correctly, then that 100,000, if it continues, would add to the amount of debt that we would be taking on over this 10-year project. Is that correct?
Yes, it would. When you get out to those 10-year plans, though, I have found that most municipalities are ambitious and optimistic with their ability to deliver a 10-year capital plan within 10 years. And so it's really tough to say, yeah, there'll be a full $1 million, you'll need another $1 million. It will certainly change. Your priorities might change, the timing might change. Maybe there's an opportunity to add some offices into a different build that the city's doing. And so it's tough to draw a straight line, but yes, it would definitely add that underfunding of the reserves would definitely add to your need for debt.
Are there any other questions for administration on this topic? Councillor DeBresser.
Okay, just a clarification question. The wording in the motion is to approve the plan. Can you give us if we acknowledge the plan, can you give us a rundown on the two different wordings in that motion? When we acknowledge a plan, we say, hey, the plan is there. The wording approval, I would say, is as council, we approve everything in this plan. Not for spending, however, the higher debt items in there, we may not approve. Like what I'm trying to get at is the word approve is kind of putting us in a place that everything in this 10-year capital plan at this point in time, we approve. Whether if we can acknowledge the plan, whether that still have the same effect.
CAO Gowdy.
Thank you, Mayor Hibbs. To Mayor Hibbs, through to Councillor DeBresser, certainly there's no requirement to approve it in the MJ. It's that the municipality must prepare a plan. So acknowledging it is equally satisfactory to us and would avoid the appearance of like tacit approval of all of those items.
Councillor DeBresser.
Yep. So this is just generally a statement, not a real question here. The amount of borrowing that we got in the next 10 years, and we've talked about it extensively here, about $22 million, just under about 18% of projected spending. As a councillor, I would say for future years, we'll have to look at projects that require the borrowing and whether we need to put more money away in future years. However, yeah, it is. I did get a call that the amount of borrowing over the next 10 years is alarming, and I said, hey, it's a plan. We will look at that. However, some priorities may need to shift in strategic planning for our 4-year term here at this stage. So other than that, I'm happy with the plan.
Is that a motion to acknowledge the 10-year capital
I
plan?
will make that motion. Let me just bring it up. I move that council acknowledges the 2026 to 2020, is it 2029?
2035.
Sorry, I got the wrong motion up. Capital plan. Sorry if that,
Councillor DePresser is saying that he wishes to make the motion that council acknowledges the 10-year capital plan 2026 to
correct.
2035. Councillor Span, did you have a further question?
Can we clarify again what we're talking about when we say acknowledging it versus approving it?
I can, I think, paraphrase that. So essentially, the 10-year capital plan is just that. It's meant to be sort of a guiding plan, a loose plan. But Councillor DeBresser's point is that if we're approving it, it may give the appearance to the public that we're saying that this is stamped in stone, this is what we're going forward with. Other than that, of course, that's not the case, but it does give that optic. Whereas using the word acknowledges, then it essentially says we're receiving as an information that it's acceptable for this year at this time, but that it could potentially change in the future. I think, would that be a fair explanation? Okay. So the motion is that council acknowledges the 10-year capital plan 2026 to 2035. Now I'm tripping over that. Did you have anything further on that?
My one last comment on this would be that I would like to see it get sent back to committee to have some further discussion and to get a bit of a better understanding of some of the inner workings of this plan. Maybe we take that City Hall out of the 10-year project completely, but use some of what's going towards that project. It sounds to me likely right now we're putting about $225,000 a year towards that project. If it's 10% less than what we're supposed to be doing, maybe we put it on year 11 or 12 and instead of reducing our yearly budget by the full 225, maybe we reduce it by 125,000 for this year. But now we're able to be overfunding some of those other projects or getting caught up on those ones. I would prefer to see something like that rather than approving it as is.
I guess what I would say to that is that we have a really good opportunity coming up very soon with our strategic planning. And this definitely would be, I feel, something that could be talked about as far as what our priorities are. It's also referencing what Councillor DeBresser mentioned as well. So this is definitely one of those, if you want to call it a living document, that will literally be potentially rewritten every single year. I would like to go ahead and proceed with the motion that's on the floor. You may vote against it, that's fine. We've definitely had our opportunity to weigh into this plan at this time. So I am going to call the question and please vote. So that is 6 in favor and 1 against. That's Councillor Span voting against. Thank you. That'll move us then to the next item, which is our 2026 capital budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Hibbs and Council. This time I'm here to present the second draft of the proposed 2026 capital budget. So during our budget workshop from November 5th to 7th, Council and Administration reviewed each project in detail, as well as identified priorities outside of the 26 projects that were originally presented. The outcome of this workshop has resulted in the changes in Table 1 below. Going through them, 500,000 for remediation, as I mentioned. The previous presentation of the old public workshop was moved from 26 to 27, keeping 500,000 in 2026 for demolition and assessment. 193,000 was moved from 2026 to 27 for work related to the development of a pedestrian trail to Midway, and then 62,500 added to 26 for a second additional brow at the Fairview Cemetery Columbarium, and then 193,000 removed from the capital budget and 10-year plan for the pickleball and badminton courts in the storage shed. All in all, total impact of these changes on the 2026 capital budget is a decrease of $437,500, bringing total expenditures down to $12.9 million. Funding for this project has changed slightly to reflect that decreased budget. So reserve withdrawals decreased by $420,000 and outside sources have decreased by $20,000. Grants and debentures are unchanged for 26. Thank you again, and I'm happy to support discussions at this point.
Any questions on this item? Just so the public is aware, these budgets have been gone through in great detail by the councillors. So that if there isn't further questions, it's probably because they had them answered during budget deliberations. So we had about 2.5 days worth of budget workshop to go through these, the capital plan that we just did in the last item, this capital budget for 2026, as well as the operating budget coming up. Are there any questions? If not, I would accept the recommended motion or a motion. Councillor Goings.
Excuse me. I move that council adopts the proposed 2026 capital budget as presented.
Nothing online. No, doesn't appear to be so. All right, so I will then go ahead and call the question. Please vote. That is green. That is unanimous. Thank you. Next item on our request for decision, 6.4, loan prepayment option. Proceed.
Thank you, Mayor Hibbs. During the budget workshop, council asked administration to analyze the financial implications of paying off 2 outstanding loans early as they're nearing maturity. This report here shows that while early repayment will incur penalties of $37,000, the net debt servicing cost savings of $68,000 alone outweigh these penalties, and then an additional benefit being increased financial flexibility in future operating budgets. A bit of background on our long-term debt. The city borrows long-term debt solely from the Alberta Capital Finance Authority, which allows for prepayments on loans, but subject to their stop loss settlement policy, meant to mitigate the province's risk with early repayment on loans that have higher interest rates than the current rates. So administration has received a quote from ACFA, which noted full payment of both loans to be $966,000, and that's including penalties and accrued interest. Details are in the table on the report. The interest saved in paying these loans off early is roughly $116,000, resulting in net savings of $68,000 when we factor the stop loss and accrued interest. Other factors to consider are the benefit of increased financial flexibility in future operating budgets. Total debt servicing costs for both of these loans is about $224,000 per year, and prepayment of these loans would eliminate those costs and allow for other financial priorities and policies. There is a risk in the immediate cash flow of $966,000, which could constrain immediate operations or limit investment opportunities. However, the city's current cash balance and forecast show no indication that operations will be negatively impacted for the next 12 months. Thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to support any discussion.
Thank you. I just wanted to make the point that, as previously mentioned, with the budget workshop that we recently had to go over these budgets, I want to say that council was being very diligent in reviewing those and looking for just possible instruments to make reductions, etc. So this in particular came out of those discussions. And so I just really want to bring that to the attention of the public. That is exceptional, frankly. Is there any questions on this item? Councillor Span.
Through Mayor Hibbs to CAO Gowdy. Do do we have a list that shows the loans and the different loans that we have and the amount of stop loss there would be? I'm just curious whether there's another loan with approximately the same balance where the stop loss is substantially less.
No, we don't have that. We haven't gotten requested the stop loss amounts. They would change month to month, so could do that, but we don't have that list right now.
I guess I would ask the rest of council, maybe it would be a good idea before we take a look at that. I don't know if the public's able to see this, but on the loan for 570,000, there's a $32,000 penalty for paying that one out, where the loan for 395, the penalty is only 4,400. I'm curious whether we should just go ahead with we didn't have a lot of this information in our deliberations. And I'm just wondering whether we should go ahead with the 395 and then take a look into what the stop loss might be on another loan that's closer to maturity.
Does administration have any thoughts on that? There's no potential negative to putting this off, I guess is what I'm trying to say, as opposed to passing budgets, which make things a little bit more difficult. Could you just create some clarification for us, please?
The budget assumes you go ahead with this. So it's not impossible, but it would require us to look at the budgeting. I was just going to have a quick look. Obviously, it's the maturity date thing. Is there loans of similar magnitude with shorter maturity dates and similar interest rates?
To Mayor Hibbs through to CEO Gowdy. I will say out of our list of loans, these two are kind of outliers in that they're closest to maturity than any of the other ones that we have currently. For reference, the first loan that you see in the report, we're looking at payment number 39 out of 50. So 11 payments left. The other one is 35 out of 40, so 15 payments left. The rest of them, for the most part, are kind of floating around 20 to 25 payments left for the rest of the debentures.
Any further questions on that, or someone prepared to make a motion? Councillor Contenti.
Thank you. Mayor Hibbs, I move that council approves the loan repayment for loan 4000100 and loan 4000591.
Anything further? Nothing online? Okay. I will call the question. Please vote. And that is green. That is unanimous. Moving along to our request for decision, our last item, 6.5. 2026 operating budget and 2027-28 financial plan.
Thank you, Mayor Hibbs and Council. This time I'm presenting the second draft of the 2026 operating budget. On August 11th, 2025, Council directed administration to prepare the 2026 operating budget with a 2.3% tax rate increase consistent with 12-month CPI, wage correction allowance of up to 2.3% and a 1% special paving tax. On November 3rd, administration presented the first draft of the 26 budget aligning with this direction. Since then, Council engaged in a comprehensive budget workshop where each department was reviewed thoroughly in detail. The adjustments made during the workshop, along with updates to the wastewater utility department, results in this second draft with a tax rate increase of 2.3% and the removal of the 2026 special paving tax. Further, the average monthly municipal utility costs for single-family homes in 2026 are held consistent with 2025 costs. Specific changes to achieve this second draft are in Table 1. You'll see 30,000 in expenses were removed for government relations and advocacy with Alberta Council. 169,000 was added to increase the employee cost of living adjustment to 2.3%, consistent with 12-month CPI. And then the provision for new positions was reduced by 74,000. An additional 8.7 thousand was included for the Lacombe Athletic Park Association's additional funding request. 224,000 in debt servicing costs are removed with the early prepayment of 2 loans. And finally, the transfer to the wastewater reserve was reduced by 140,000. The next section is the revenue comparison from 25 to 26. Most revenue streams are unchanged from the previous report, with the exception of the items that I mentioned before. So user fees decreasing to keep single-family household utility costs consistent with 2025. And then the taxation revenue decrease of 192,000 for the removal of the special paving tax. For expenses, the changes from the first draft are a decrease in debt servicing, again for 224,000, a net 97,000 increase in personnel, 9,000 increase in funding to others for the LAPA funding request, 30,000 reduction in goods and services expenses, and $150,000 decrease in transfers to reserves. The next section revisits the table of unfunded priorities and policies. So the items still not included in the budget from that table are 60,000 for the Community Connector Platform project, $40,000 transfer to capital reserves for infill development, a remaining 51,000 for local agency funding requests over 2.3%, and details are in Appendix 3. And then 30,000 for a regional labor market study and workforce strategy project. Finally, a new appendix has been added from the previous report in Appendix 5, which shows the utility bill estimates for typical customers within the city. Thank you for your time and attention, and I'm happy to support any discussions.
For this item, do I have any questions? Councillor Span.
I'm just plugging in my computer here. I can find it. The one item in here that I wanted to have some further discussion on, if I'm not getting ahead of myself, is the municipal growth rate that we're using. Is that this section here? We're expecting 355,000 to come from municipal growth, which is a 1.85% increase. My understanding is that we're using that number 1.86% because that's what the Lacombe municipal growth average has been over the last 4 years. Is that correct?
Yes, it's based on historical growth in new assessment. It's not necessarily directly related to population growth of the same. So, for example, if you had a disproportionate growth in commercial or industrial, you wouldn't see a corresponding growth in population, but you might see new assessment growth related to that development.
Through Mayor Hibbs to CAO Gowdy, what would be the implications of increasing that number on our budget? The reason for my question is because if I've been looking at other communities around us, and Black Falls over that same period of time has averaged 3.6. I know they're a faster growing community. I know 2016, our growth rate here in Lacombe was quite a bit lower than the 1.86, and it seems like it's been trending upwards. Last year, for example, the number that I was looking at in the budget, it was 2%, but actuals were about 2.1%. And I'm just curious what would be the implication of increasing that number? If there would be any opposition to increasing it?
CEO Gowdy.
Thank you, Mayor Hibbs. Through your worship to Councillor Span. Opposition, you'll have to look to your fellow councilors, but the implication would be it's a direct one-to-one tax offset. So an extra 100,000 in growth would be a direct 200,000 in years. It's a straight line. So that number though has been increased from prior years. I was just going to take a look. You have the actual new growth numbers over the last couple of years and what we're projecting. Would you be able?
No, sorry. At this time,
No problem.
cannot get that for you.
CEO Gowdy, is that something you're able to find or is that not realistic?
No, I don't think we would have that because we would just have the total growth each year. It wouldn't be related to, or sorry, like the total requisition. We wouldn't have it broken down into growth without doing some analysis.
Councillor Span, do you have something additional?
Are we able to increase that number with a motion and then approve the budget at the same time, or would that send the budget back to committee?
It wouldn't send it back to committee, but I mean, you certainly could make that request to adjust that amount. It would have an impact on the budget. There would definitely be some discussion around that. There is no motion actually on the floor at all at this time, if I am remembering correctly. So if you were to make a motion, it would be that you would add that amendment, I guess, to it. If you're prepared to do that already, or if others have some comments. Councillor De Bresser.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Mayor Hibbs, through to Councillor Span. I'm hesitant to rely on that number to balance the budget. Now, I think that's the intent of your question here. Can we get the 2.3% lower by increasing our revenue of new assessment? Just a clarification, as a matter of process, the handoff from the property assessor will happen in the new year. Would we bring back spring budget adjustments with that number before we actually set the tax rate increase? In the way of spring adjustments, spring budget adjustments.
Yes, we would have the new growth number in time for the setting of the tax rate that happens in the spring.
Councillor Contenti, did you still have a question?
No, I think I've kind of got the answer there. And just clarification through Mayor Hibbs to CEO Gowdy. You're saying if we increase it $100,000 on potential growth, we would be able to possibly decrease 100,000 on the operating budget. Is that how we would read that?
Sort of. It wouldn't actually be a reduction in the operating budget. It would just be an increased revenue. And so you could either take on new expenses or offset other revenue that you planned on.
Councillor Span.
I would like to see that number get increased, especially when I look at the way the growth has been trending. I do think if we're able to decrease what needs to be done on the property tax side from municipal residents, that makes a big difference. And like CAO Gowdy said, this is an item that directly impacts that. I do think I guess a question I would have is when we get those updated growth numbers in the spring, does that mean if growth is 2%, that we use that number then, or do we just operate at a surplus?
CEO Gowdy.
That's a council choice, whether you essentially take that money as a unexpected revenue and it contributes to a surplus, or whether you use that to lower the overall tax rate increase across the rest of the municipality. It's an option that you would debate and deliberate at that time.
Councillor Contenti?
Thank you to Mayor Hibbs, to Matt, Councillor Spam. I kind of see where you're going and I agree with you to a point, but I'm just thinking that maybe the spring session would be a better time and I'm certainly in favor of if there is that growth, that potential more revenue, not to just increase spending, but to actually reduce cost. So if that helps, that's kind of what I would like to see, but I also agree we could increase it at this time.
You can go.
Councillor Span?
I guess where I'm coming from, I feel pretty strongly about this. I think we need to do more work on that 2.3%. Partly because what we saw last year too was that these tax increases affect people disproportionately. 2.3% may not seem like a huge increase when we average it out over the course of everybody. It's, you know, $100 a year. Last year, I believe there was a 2.89% increase, and which would effectively, you know, be $130 a year. Yet there was many residents that I talked to on the campaign trail where they saw their monthly bills increase by over $100. And if someone's on a fixed income, here in Lacombe, we've got 30% seniors. They're on fixed incomes. These types of things hurt them way harder than maybe other municipalities. And I realize other municipalities are increasing taxes right now, and we'd almost stand out. Maybe we stand out already with a 2.3%, but and it's easy to justify an increase this year based on costs that have been downloaded to the municipalities from the provinces. But when I was talking to people at the Munis conference, we already stand out in a few ways. I didn't hear from any other councillors where it was a brand new council. The majority of them were all majority returning, right? I think if we approve this as is without making any kind of other changes, we show the residents that it's going to be more of the same, and that really bothers me. I think by reworking some of the numbers, I think we can come to a balanced budget without any substantial tax increase, where we're not kicking the can down the road, where we won't need to do any kind of big increase in the next few years, and where we're not cutting services. And I think it would be pretty cool if we stand out in that regard.
Councillor DeBresser?
Thank you, Mayor Hibbs. Just a couple of points. I think the combination of our 2.5 days together, we ended up in this pot, 2.3%. Rough estimates on a $400,000 house, we're talking about $6 a month. Holding utility rates is another win for our residents. Removal of the payment tax is another win. I'm definitely entrusting in administration that the interest revenue will be sustainable over the next few years, as that's 44% increase there. And there's still some unknowns to our budget. Revenue from new assessment, like we said, we're not putting enough away in reserves, and the collective bargaining with the Lacombe Police Association. So at this point in time, we met our policy goal, and if we want to shift the policy, that's a different discussion. However, our taxation preparation policy says 2.3% was the target. I think this budget reflects administration's work to hit that target. So if there's no further questions, I'd like to move the recommended motion.
Councillor DeBresser is moving that council approves the 2026 operating budget as presented. Councillor Contenti?
Yeah, I had a question before we go to that motion. I would like to actually make a change to that motion in that we remove or put back in 1% special paving tax and reduce the tax rate increase to 1.3. That way it's very clear to our residents that 1% is targeted for paving only. and it can't be used anywhere else. And in essence, we've pushed the tax rate back to 1.3% or at 1.3%, still meeting our other targets. But I just think it makes sense to leave that paving tax in now after doing a lot of thinking about it and talking to residents, and they understand that paving tax. And removing it might just be harder later, 2 or 3 years down the road, if we think we need that dedicated tax back in. So that's would be my suggestion for that motion.
So can I understand that to be an amending motion then to Councillor De Bresser's motion?
If he actually made it, yeah.
As far, that is a motion that's on the floor.
Sorry, the admin recommendation, yeah, the council approves the 2026 operating budget as presented. Is that on the floor? or
That is on the floor.
Okay.
That is my understanding. Was
Yeah,
that supposed to be my
That's
understanding?
my understanding,
Yes.
yeah.
So therefore, Councillor Contentes, if he's willing to put forward an amending motion, would now be an amending motion on your motion. Yes, so is that
Yes,
correct?
I'd like to make that amending
Okay.
motion.
So just so everybody's up to speed, Councillor Contenti is making an amending motion that changes the presentation to reduce the 2.3% increase to a 1.3% and reinstate the 1% paving tax. Are we all understanding that? So now we start debate on that amending motion. We will leave the initial motion alone. If there's any thoughts or questions on the amendment. If administration could just clarify that overall, that does not make any changes to the budget, or that does make any changes to the budget. CAO Gowdy.
So we have discussed this ahead of time. Thank you for giving us the heads up so we could look at that. Mechanically, behind the scenes, there's a little bit extra work to pass a second special paving tax bylaw, but there's no functional impact on the budget. It's a policy decision of council whether you want to maintain that revenue stream through the special paving tax mechanism or just roll it into the general municipal requisition. So very easy to implement, does not prevent budget from being passed through.
Do we have any, sorry,
Just
would you like
further-
to speak further to it?
Yeah, just
Oh.
further to that, I just like it that now I can sometimes foresee, well, we rolled it in and we have more paving, or we didn't get enough of the paving we need to do. And now some of our streets that needed paving didn't get done, whereas this dedicated fund says it needs to be kept for just that purpose. And I believe that's what past council's thought process was as well.
Any questions for clarification on that? I've got nobody online that's wanting to weigh in on that. No? Okay. If there's no further discussion, then I guess I can call the question then. This is on the amending motion. Did you have something? Sorry.
I'm just gotten over the amending motion to my colleague, and so he's going to be putting it into the system to give you that option. The amending motion will read, to add to the original motion with the amendment that the operating budget, and sorry, it says operation budget, should be operating budget, include a 1% special paving tax and a 1.3% increase to the general municipal requisition, rather than a 2.3% increase to the general municipal requisition.
And I see Councillor Dykeslag has her hand up on the screen. So if we could hear from her.
Can you let me know if you can hear me? Can you hear me? Looks like you can't hear me.
We can hear you now, Sonia, or Councillor Dykeslag.
All right, thank you, Mayor Hibbs. I just want to make a quick comment. I also had an opportunity to consider this suggestion that Councillor Contenti is bringing up. I do like it. My only question here is, would it have any negative impact on the 2.3 requests made by our boards and committees? Or would we still be able to approve that as the 2.3% requests that they all made?
CO Gowdy. Oh, light back on again.
Thank you, Mayor Hibbs. Through to Councillor Dykeslag. I guess that's up to council. I wouldn't see there being a direct line between what was sent to them as a budget target and set as a budget target in August. And this is strictly a mechanism of how that is apportioned. It still results in a 2.3% tax rate increase. And so the direction given to those community groups is still valid, in my opinion. But of course, it's up to council to make the final decision.
Strictly speaking for myself, I would agree with that assessment. Is there anybody willing to make comment on that or disagree? Does not look so. All right, I think everybody has had a chance to weigh in on. So again, just speaking to the amending motion here, which is the removal of 1% from the overall operating budget. So it makes it 1.3 and the reinstatement of the paving tax at 1%. I will call the question. Please enter your vote.
Oh, one last
Oh,
comment.
sorry.
This isn't voting to approve the budget at this point. This is just voting to.
This is just the amendment.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Please vote. So that is a 6 in favor, 1 against, with Councillor DeBresser voting against. So that means that the amendment has been successful. That does not mean, to Councillor Span's point, that the motion has passed. So we now return back to the original motion, but now amended. And I would open the floor up to further discussion. Councillor Span. No? Okay. Anything further online as well? No? Okay. All right. So then we will go ahead and vote on now the original but amended motion. Everybody clear on that? Please proceed to vote. And that is a 5-2 vote with Councillors DeBresser and Span voting against. We do have a second portion to this section regarding the financial plan. Is there anybody prepared to make that motion? Well, the mayor actually is able to make motions, so I guess I will make that, although I usually try not to do that. I will move that council approves the 2027-2028 financial plan as presented. No further comments?
As amended.
I guess in theory, it does affect year 2 and 3, does it? Administration?
It wouldn't affect years 2 and 3 because you haven't given direction on the inclusion of a special paving tax there. So no decision has
Oh,
been
okay.
made that would affect years 2 and 3 at this time.
Brilliant. So as presented then. I'll go ahead and call the question. Please vote. And that is a 6-1 vote with Councillor Span voting against. That does then bring us to the end of our public portion of the meeting. We will be proceeding to a in-camera session now next. I would like to have a break in between if that's okay with everybody. But we will go ahead, I think, and make the motion to move in camera and then have a 10-minute break if that is suitable for everybody. So I would entertain that motion. I'm not making that one.
I'll make that motion.
Councillor Span is moving to put us in camera at 6:45. Oh, sorry, Sonia, or sorry, Councillor Dykeslag.
Uh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, I know we have a motion that we're adjourning, but just a quick question to administration. Now that we have approved the 2026 capital, or sorry, operating budget, how does that get communicated out to public other than just our minutes? Or would that be still a part of our strategic planning where we're going to do maybe a different approach in how we're communicating these major financial decisions to our public?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Dykes-Lack. We typically do a media release and some social media posts about major decisions like this. It doesn't preclude changes or enhancements to be considered at the strategic planning. We're expecting that. But it isn't just the minutes. There is messaging beyond only the minutes of council.
Does that suitably answer your question?
I believe it suitably answers my question, but I think one of the things I just want to highlight, and I think is important to all of us, is that this decision, of course, was difficult. We're trying to have little property tax or any sort of tax increase. But I think we're also forgetting, or not forgetting, sorry, but I think we really want to highlight the zero on the utilities for the year to our residents as well, and just finding ways to capitalize that we were very prudently looking at this budget as we did in that workshop, and really be able to share that with the public. Because it was a very hard and tough process, and I thought it was very thoughtful throughout the process. So just want to find a way to communicate that. And I think we can individually too with our folks that we speak to. So thank you for that.
Thank you. So we do have a motion on the floor from Councillor Span to move in camera. Please proceed to vote. And that is a unanimous decision. We're now in camera, but we will take a 10-minute recess.